Thanks. Good evening, everyone. This is the Excel Advanced class. So kind of to kick us off today, we're going to go through some of the basic review of Excel and its features. So you should have the workbook open titled Excel Advanced Practice. You can kind of, once you pull that up, we'll go through a quick overview of everything. So Excel is organized in a series of ribbons and tabs. If you look at the top, this is what we call the ribbon. And each one has there's a set of tabs. So right now we're on the Home tab. This is kind of where your most frequently accessed features are, followed by the Insert tab. If you want to add something to Excel, this is where you would go into Insert tab to insert something. There's the Formula tab. This is kind of the houses, the function library. You can browse various formulas. They're all broken out by their different categories here at the top, as well as some of the other troubleshooting and formula auditing features are here. The other contextual tabs to know would be kind of the data tab. So if you're dealing with anything with very large sets of data, this is kind of a good starting point, as well as various kind of forecasting and more advanced analytics options. The review tab includes kind of one of my more important highlights with doing Excel. This is where you find spell check. Excel does not do spell check automatically. So after you make a Excel workbook and you're about ready to send it, please always remember to spell check. The view tab is how you view it on your computer right now. So if you want to have grid lines or formula bars, headings, freezing panes, this is where you go to the view tab. The other tab to note would be your page layout tab. So if you want to print something, you go to page layout. So that's where you'll find your print area, breaks, the orientation, as well as various zoom and what if you want to print headings or grid lines and so on. And then, so again, the page layout is to print. The view tab is how you view it on your computer. In Excel, you kind of have a workbook made up of multiple worksheets. So our workbook today is called Excel Advanced Practice, and it's made up of 3 worksheets. That'd be the practice worksheet, auto inventory worksheet, and model key. You can kind of see that at the bottom where you can switch between the different worksheets to select it, and you'll see the highlight indicates which one you're on currently. So when you're in a tab, something to know is that each tab is kind of grouped together, kind of common features. So on your Home tab, you'll see at the bottom a font group. So as we're kind of going through this, I might say to go to the Home tab alignment group, or might tell you to go to the Home tab editing group to find something. And these are just helpful for quick references, as well as if you have detailed editing or detailed features you're looking for in that group, you can kind of hit the expand button in the bottom right to pull up a more detailed view of all the options you have for you there. In Excel, it is organized in that grid fashion. We have kind of cells made up of columns, where columns intersect with rows. So our column is indicated by letter D, row indicated by number 3 on the left. So the intersection of that would be cell D3. And you can see your cell that you're in by looking to the left of the formula bar, which indicates the address, so D3. And there's your formula bar, which has 2 in it. So if we go over to our practice sheet, we're kind of talk through kind of the big important functions. So in our previous Excel work, we've dealt a lot with kind of pre-made functions, as well as various sorting and formatting of cells. So when you use Excel, the big thing you want to do is to calculate. Is kind of one of the more common uses, is to be able to calculate values so that you don't have to keep always typing them in. And something to know when you're starting to think through this is Excel views formulas in the sense starting kind of left to right. And I guess what I mean by that is if you have something like x equals 1 plus 2, we know that is the same as 1 plus 2 equals x. These 2 items are the same. And so when you're looking at Excel, what you want to kind of think of is you want to always start with equals when you're typing in a function. And the way to kind of think through that is right now we're in cell G1. So cell G1, we want to be equal to 1 plus 2. So if I just kind of look at that, and we always start with equals, we go G1 equals 1 plus 2, and we press, oh, make sure we don't have an extra space. You press enter, and you'll see you get 3. And now this is kind of a very useful option, right? Like, man, we are essentially using it as a calculator, but that's not really the purpose of Excel. What we want Excel to do is to have kind of relative references so it changes, because what we just did, you could do in any calculator. So if we want to add up cells or whatever values that are, we can kind of use references, and the references are going to be the actual values in our formula, or instead of actual values in our formula, we're going to use references. So if we're trying to add 1 plus 2, and for whatever reason we actually just trying to add maybe A1 and B1 together, instead of typing equals 1 plus 2, I'm going to go and do A1 plus B1. And we hit enter, and we get 3. And the reason that you want to try this is whereas typically you would have kind of that hard-coded, if we had just hit equals 1 plus 2, that wouldn't change. But now, if A suddenly becomes 32, you hit, oh, if A suddenly becomes 32, we hit enter, you'll see that it then becomes 34. All right, so our formula automatically updated to reflect the update. Now, and if we were going to go and look at adding the same thing, you know, maybe we want to add 1 plus A2 plus B2 plus C2, we can kind of go into the next formula below, and we'll type in A2 plus B2 plus C2. And again, you can either type it, or you can kind of do a combination of mouse and keyboard and type plus, and then I just click the cell. And as I'm kind of coming across this, you want to notice that Excel is trying to help us out by color coding. So in addition to the current cell select, which has that kind of marquee, you can kind of look back and see A2 is blue, and you see the blue outline around A2. B2 is red, and you see that red, and it kind of goes so on and so forth through that, and that's to help you see that formula. And then again, you don't have that value in the cell yet, because right now we haven't confirmed it. So kind of that enter button is how you confirm a value or a formula in there. And again, we're editing in the formula bar. So once I hit enter, you'll see that the formula is actually calculates. We see 21. And if I need to edit that formula, I'm going to go back and click on G2, and then I can see up here in the formula bar and edit it as appropriate. And so, you know, once we have that function in there, now anytime, based on kind of how you have your Excel set up, you can kind of, you know, this changes to 2. I can kind of update that to 2, go over and make sure my formula calculates. Right now I have a thing, so it's not auto-calculating, but you can go in there and hit enter, and you'll see that that now reflected to 17. And again, if you know, once you're out of that cell, you only see like end calculation. If you want to see kind of not just that total, you want to see your formula, you need to go ahead and click the cell with your formula, and you'll see in the formula bar to be able to edit it. So if we go on, we can kind of switch over to our auto inventory sheet. We're going to look at creating a basic dashboard. So kind of our first thing we're going to look at is doing the AutoSum. So if we were looking at this set of data, and we want to understand how much in value or how much in dollar value do we have of cars or of vehicles on our lot, we can go into our auto inventory tab and scroll down to E48. If I click here, then I go up on my home tab, we'll go over and just press in the formula bar for this time. We're just going to click, oh yeah, so we'll go up to our home tab, go to the editing group, and we'll click AutoSum. And once you click AutoSum, you'll kind of notice again, it is still starting with that equal sign, because formulas and functions always start with equals. You'll see the function is called sum. And then with all functions, there's going to be an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. So we have open parentheses E2 colon E47. And kind of what that means is that the Excel looked for all of the contiguous values near it that are all kind of the same data type. So it found above it was numbers and went all the way up until the numbers changed over to letters, or a string value. That's where it ended. So we have selected E2 through E47. I can go ahead and hit enter, and we'll see our total value. Something to make sure you're noticing of it, it did go with all contiguous values. So if there was an empty cell in there, it would have stopped the AutoSum, would not have actually gone all the way up the list. This is just another good reminder to always make sure you have kind of nice data, put some time into cleaning it before you go through actually creating it fully. So if we scroll down to our dashboard, so we know that how to do our AutoSum, right? So I'm clicking D50. I'm going to go ahead and go to my AutoSum button. And when we click AutoSum, we'll notice that, again, it looked for that value. So for this one, we're going to need to change that range that it's selecting. We don't want it to select D2 through D49, which is what the AutoSum attempted to pick up as what we were aiming to add. We want it to be E2 to E49. Oh, E47. So you just type in E2 through E47 in the parentheses, and we press enter, and we see our same total inventory value that we had in E48. And then if we were going to go and look at doing the average, so the average is similar to the AutoSum. So if we go up to our AutoSum button, you actually hit the down arrow next to AutoSum. You'll see average. Go ahead and click average. It'll ask you for your range. So I'll try to find the range that it wants to average, but again, AutoSum and auto features look for the first non-contiguous kind of number value around it. So it just found our total inventory price above it. That's not what we want. Again, we're going to edit that range to be E2 through E47. We press enter, and we can see our total value. So these first two functions have kind of been those very basic kind of normal math functions. So with Excel, not everything is actually a math function. Excel does include other options that would be kind of more useful in other areas. If we had a car inventory lot, something that we might want to know is how long the cars have been on our lot, because the cost of storing the car on that. So we go ahead and look at doing a calculation to figure out how long cars have been on the lot. And kind of our first step to doing that is we'll want to make sure we're calculating how many days it's been on the lot in order. So we would need to understand what today's date is. So if we go to the top, and we're going to go ahead and add a few rows in. So again, I'm right clicking and going to insert. You can Control Shift plus sign. There are a few other ways to add in rows. We're going to go ahead and add in a few rows and click in cell 1. And I will go to type in equals, because all my functions always start with equal and all formulas start with equals. And we're going to do the today function. So I'll type in today. And for this function, there are no kind of parameters you need to add to it. You just have to have the function. So open parentheses, close parentheses, and enter. And then now it has today's date. And the bright side with this is that date's going to always change every time we open up the Excel book. So tomorrow it will reflect the next day and so on. And that way, when you calculate how many days the vehicle's been on the lot based on this, it will always be up to date. So we're going to go ahead and make our days on lot or time on lot column. So I'll just go over to G4, type in time on lot, press enter. And then we're going to click into the cell for G5, and we're going to start our function with an equal sign. And we're going to click on today's date, subtract from that the date it was on the lot, and press enter. And you'll notice that it has a weird old date, and it's actually the number of days from year 1900, but that does not help us. So what we need it to be is actually just the number format. So if we click on G4 or G5, we can go ahead and change that format to be number. And you'll see that car has been on the lot for 947 days. And as we learned something from our kind of first Excel, one of the things we can do to duplicate that formula down the whole column is autofill. So if I click over on the bottom right, you'll see the autofill cursor will appear. Double click. And you'll notice something weird as it kind of, it provided the same number. Well, you also have to make sure it calculates. Yeah. So it messed up going down, and the reason behind this is kind of absolute and relative references. So yours will probably replicate it and just have kind of the numbers will go off and go down the line. As you can kind of see as I make mine calculate, you'll notice that it did mess up. It kind of went a little off. So the big reason that this is occurring is absolute and relative references. So while this first one is C1 minus F5, what that's using is kind of relative references. And the way to think of a relative reference is if you were thinking about giving directions to for someone, you know, say from the library to the Boston Mall, you might say go 3 blocks north, 2 blocks west. And that will get you kind of to the mall from the library, but it will not get you to the mall from anywhere else. So it's kind of relative directions. It's relative to the position you currently are in. Whereas if you wanted to think about absolute references, that would be given the address to the mall and saying go here. And that's always the address to the mall, no matter where you are. And so as you kind of think what that would mean is we went over to our practice sheet. And I was going to do A equals, A6 plus B6. What this is actually doing, this function is actually just adding the 2 cells. A6 is in Excel, what it's thinking of it, it's 5 columns to the left of where it is, or 6 columns to the left of where it is, and B6 is 5 columns. And that's all that function's actually telling it, is just add 6 columns to the left plus 5 columns to the left and put it there. And the way to kind of see that is if you kind of drag it down, you'll see it's now doing A7 plus B7 and so on. But if I want it to always be, so when I autofill it or use other references, if I wanted to always add A6 plus B6, I'll need to add dollar signs. And this will turn it into absolute references. So you can kind of click in your function, you'll put a dollar sign in front of the 6 and a dollar sign in front of the A, and that means that our column and our row reference will both be absolute. Now I'll click and I can drag it down. And you'll see it's always going to add A6 plus B6 as I drag the function and do autofill around. So then whatever these 2 values are, if I come and calculate this, will automatically calculate. They will update to be those 2 values. So if we go back to our auto inventory tab, we can kind of update this item to actually show the correct function. So we just always want C1 to be the item we subtract from. So I'm just going to make C1 an absolute reference. Do my autofill down. And pardon, this will probably not be for yours, but for my sheet, I'm going to make sure my function calculates. So I'll go and hit calculate now. I have auto calculate turned off currently. So then we have now our time on lot has been updated. The next function we're going to look at is kind of something we would want to do if we want to draw our attention to the cars that are more than 900 days old. And again, we'll, just for this example, right? The really cars that have been on the lot for a really long time. This is something that you could look at where I want to have, the word advertise appear next to every area where there's something more than 900. And I don't want to have to go through and look at it every day, right, to see what's the ones that are greater than 900 and so on. This is where you could look at using a logical statement. And then for this one, we're going to think about the if statement. So the if statement is something you need to think of as it's if then. It's kind of a logical test, right? So if something, some kind of test is true, do this. If it's false, do that. So what we're going to look at is if you go over here next to time on lot, we're going to go up into our more functions. And again, this is where you can kind of look up any of them, but if is right here and one of the commonly used ones. And this option of inserting formulas I find to be very useful for new formulas or ones I'm not very familiar with, because it does help you explain or think through what you're working on, right? So the if function, and these are the 3 different arguments that you need to add for it, checks whether a condition is met and returns one value of true or another value of false, right? So the logical test is any value or expression that can be evaluated to be true or false. So for our case, the value is going to be if the cell G5 is greater than 900. If it's greater than 900, we want it to say advertise. But if it's not, we'll just leave it blank, right? So if the cell is greater, if G5 920 is greater than 900, you can see the right side again of doing it this way is you know that we did the function right, because it says true, and that means it's going to put advertise. Whereas if we had incorrectly, put it this way, because we, got our greater than, less than sign messed up, you'll see that it comes out as false, and that's not what we want it to be. So I'll just leave it as true. Click OK. And then we'll go down here and just autofill it on down. Oh, I did not leave it fully blank. So what this is doing is when you don't specify exactly that you want it blank, it will return the word false. So easy way to do is just kind of put your comma, then just do quotation, quotation. So it's just returning nothing. And I can go ahead and autofill this. And something else to know is when you were in that, we could just type in advertise and it did correct us. If we were typing it in, you always have to put quotations around text, kind of a string character. Typically, Excel does not see that without the quotations. Otherwise, it'd be trying to think of a cell reference that was ADE, and of course that wouldn't work. Or it would think of a named range. Oh, I think we did get a. So going to the next item, we're going to look at doing conditional formatting. So we have that word advertise. If we want to really, we're really trying to impress the boss, so really trying to make our lives a little bit easier for this, we could look at doing a conditional formatting for this column of H to draw even more attention to advertise. So if I go ahead and click the column headings, I'm going to go ahead and format everything in column H. And up here under styles, you'll see conditional formatting. And I'm going to go ahead and do highlight cell rules, and we're going to highlight everything when it has text that contains, right? So that's the one we obviously need it for. I'm just going to go ahead and do advertise. So now anywhere where it contains advertise, it's going to go ahead and do that. And you could actually change the formatting here if you click the drop down, and you go to custom format all the way at the bottom and get to kind of really customize what you want. I'll just do light red fill with red text.
David, yes? I'm sorry to interrupt. There is a question. Okay. Okay. So how current does the version of Excel need to be? Are most of the functions available in older versions like the Office 2016 that they have on their desktop?
Yeah. So most of these functions are. I would say everything we've done would be very widely available all the way to some of the older versions of Excel. The more recent versions of Excel add kind of more advanced features around data models and kind of geospatial graphing features into Excel that those we wouldn't be covering today, but everything around kind of your basic if function and your sum function. A lot of this will be very relevant to any version of Excel, probably after like 2005. And then even, I would say, for a lot of Google Sheets applications, a lot of this would be able to be transferred over. It's a lot of the same kind of thinking. Hope that clarifies. Or let me know if you have any other specific questions on that. So one thing to note when you're doing the conditional formatting, if you need to go and actually change a rule that you had made. So if you go down here into kind of conditional formatting to manage rules, you can actually click here and just show everything on this worksheet. And this is where you can see all the rules that you've added for conditional formatting. So if you have multiple rules to highlight something red, yellow, green for some kind of stoplight or status indicator, this would be where you could go look at it to see if everything was working right. The next item we're going to look at doing is kind of one of our other logical ones. So this is going to be kind of the count function, right? So we want to see how many cars are on the lot. So if I come down here, or how many vehicles. So next to number of vehicles, we'll go ahead and click in to cell D58, and I'll go over here to the top one again, and I can see that if I go to more functions, there's an option for count. So it counts the number of cells in the range that contain numbers, and click OK. And we'll go ahead and count everything between D. We'll go ahead and select it this time. So I click the arrow button on the right. I can drag it down. Let's select our range that we want to count everything in. Click OK, and you'll see that we'll go ahead and count everything up. So some of the items here to note is that we input our formula or our range between D5 and D50. So if you were to add a value here at the bottom, it wouldn't actually adjust or be included in this count if we added something here. But if you added something in between, it would actually update our formulas, right? So if I added a new truck here, then our function would be updated. So that's something to note as far as that goes. So we've counted all of the vehicles on the lot. Now, if we want to do something more specific, where we want to count only the SUVs on the lot so that we can have kind of a running breakdown of cars, SUVs, trucks. If I go in here to cell D59, I can go up here to the top right, go and look in more functions. And we'll look up count if. So I'm just going to type in count, click go, and I'll see there's a count if function right here. And so with the count if, it's going to count the numbers of cells within a range that meet a given condition. So it's kind of combining our count function and our if function to do this item. So our range is going to be here, because we're going to go ahead and count in the type function for everywhere where we see the word, we want to do car. All right, so it went down and it counted that we have 18 cars on the lot. And if we wanted to go ahead and do this again, we could go ahead and do it for trucks and SUVs. And, you know, a simple method might be for this would be to kind of, you know, if we lock in our formula and just make it absolute. Again, this is all going to be a matter of how you want to go about doing this. I'll just do this because I don't want the range, and then I'm just going to drag our formula to 3 more, change this to SUV, change this one to truck. And now I have a number of SUVs and number of trucks. And so we kind of filled out more of our little dashboard, right? So now we have a breakdown of what cars are on the lot. And we might want to think about having even more of a breakdown on this, right? So if we want to go ahead and say, well, how much in dollar value of inventory we have on it, because 11 trucks or 11 SUVs might be the same price in dollars that we have sitting on our lot as 18 cars. So in this one, we could go ahead and look at doing a sum if. So this is going to be a formula, again, kind of combining the logical if statement with the summation formula, similar to kind of how the count if was. So if I go over here to the more functions, we'll type in sum, click go, we'll go to sum if. Now, sum if one adds a third argument that we'll have to kind of think through, right? So we're going to add the cells that's specified by a given condition or criteria. So this range, the first range we're doing is actually the range we're evaluating the criteria on, right? So with that said, if we're trying to add up just the dollar values of cars or trucks or SUVs, we need to give it the type, right? So we're going to do the C column for our range, and our criteria is going to be everywhere that there is a car. So we'll type in car, but then the sum range is going to be, so what are the values you're actually summing? And if you leave this value blank, you're actually going to add up in the range column. So it's right now just trying to add up text, and that's why it kind of gives you nothing. But we want it to add up price. So I'll go ahead and select the price, and then now if I click OK, you'll see that we have our three argument sum if function. We're looking in the criteria, or we're looking in the range of C5 through C50 for everywhere where there's an instance of car, and we're adding the corresponding row value that is in column E, right? And again, I might want to go ahead and do this again for our SUV and trucks. So I'm just going to make absolute references for our two ranges, drag it down. We'll fill in dollar of SUVs, dollar of trucks, and then we'll go ahead and update our formula to be SUV and to be truck. And you see right there, right, we're only about, they're actually much more similar in price range, even though there's only 11 SUVs on the lot. And I can go ahead and change the formatting very quickly by just come up in the number area and just clicking that dollar sign so that we add our dollars and commas. Can decrease the decimal by 2 because there's no decimals in this sheet. That's kind of your sum if statement. So now you kind of have even more of a breakdown of our dashboard for this inventory. Kind of the last one we're going to look at doing is kind of what you always hear about when you hear about Excel. This is one of the more useful logical functions you'll go about using. So we've kind of done the math functions, state functions, if functions. What VLOOKUP does is it kind of reduces a lot of that manual labor or manual looking up, right? So it's looking up, and V actually is vertical. So it's going to find something in a column and return it. So if we look at our auto inventory, we see we have a model number, right? So this could have been some import only gave us a model number, but we do know we have a lookup worksheet elsewhere, right? But if this inventory is 50 long, who wants to sit here and go, all right, for model number 2, that's an Avalon. Go over here, figure out what 2 is, and all right, that's Avalon. Then maybe like add a column around it. We could type it in, right? Avalon. But that would take forever. So what VLOOKUP is going to do is it's going to look up, it's going to find, it's going to say, what are you looking for? Where do you want me to find it? And what column of values do you want me to return? So I'll explain this in a little bit more. So if we go in here, we go to the more functions. And again, I always recommend starting in this kind of insert function item for any new item, because it's going to give you a nice kind of wizard or step-by-step item that can help you think through this. And VLOOKUP is pretty contextually dependent on a lot of these items. And it's, we've been doing a lot of 1 or 2 or 3 arguments. And now this is our first one where we have kind of 4 arguments to enter, or 4 data points to enter so that it produces the right result. So we're going to have VLOOKUP. So we're going to say, what value are we looking up? Well, you want to find D5. So we're looking for 2. And again, VLOOKUP is it's a vertical, so it's going to be thinking in a vertical data lookup table. And what I mean by that is it's saying, all right, where is the table of values in which you want the data received? So this is your lookup table, right? So the model key, and this is in a vertical layout, right? So it's multiple cells going down the column instead of horizontal would be going for an H lookup. So we're looking for cell D5 within this table. And it says, well, what number or what value do you want me to return? So if you come here, we're giving it 2 columns of data. We want it to return the second column's entry. And if there were 3 columns of data, we might think about the 3rd column, but the 1st column is actually where our model lookup value is. So we want it to be 2. So again, this is the column number in the table array from which the matching value should be returned. And the last item is usually something you don't really have to do it, but I typically would advise for false, because true has a few different assumptions where it does an approximate match. It's just not, for most instances, you can get away with just using false.
David, hi, this is Sarah. We had another question.
Okay.
Okay. When you enter a value to compare in a formula, just a syntax question, are you entering the quotation marks or does Excel do that automatically? I've seen differences in quotes, parentheses, etc.
So when I'm using the wizard that you've kind of seen us use a few times, that will actually put the quotation marks in there for me. And again, that wizard's just to help you try to minimize some of these different steps that you have to kind of remember for Excel, right? If you're typing it in, and if you kind of see here in the if you're typing it just straight into the formula bar without that wizard, you do have to put those quotation marks around text. And what I mean by that is kind of if there's a word you're looking for or a word you want it to return, you put quotation marks around it because otherwise Excel always looks for cell references. And as far as parentheses, there's always an open parentheses and a closed parentheses for functions. So if it's a sum or an average or an if or a VLOOKUP, there's always going to be an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. So that's always kind of the rule of thumb for that. And then as far as parentheses goes, you know, Excel practices PEMDAS and all of your algebras as well if you use parentheses in a function. Let me know if that answers or if you have any other further clarification. It's a good question. It is something that practice will help you kind of remember the different specific items, but that's your best bet. And
Thank you, David.
So again, for our VLOOKUP, so what we've done is we're looking for D5. We know that we need to make this model key is always going to be that lookup table is not going to change. So we're going to go ahead and make this an absolute reference. And then now I can go ahead and autofill this whole thing. And you'll see it just went over there. It found all of our models and we'll model. So and give it a second for anyone to, I would recommend trying it. Let me know if you have any questions on that. Otherwise, like I had mentioned before, the best kind of method to keep learning and growing in Excel is to always practice it. The more you kind of use it, the more you'll remember a lot of these different items as far as when quotations marks or when not. And then kind of working through your absolute and relative references is something useful. And I think I mentioned it early on, you know, something, if you need to see what a formula is, you kind of have to click in, look in the formula bar, or you can kind of click show formulas to see it, to check in. So otherwise, I'll be on for any questions we might have. I know there's a lot of information, and the VLOOKUP can be tricky. Just let me know if you have any questions on it. Or if there are any other generic Excel questions, let me know. So, otherwise, thanks everyone for kind of joining us. And the library has a few different various resources to help along with this with Linda, as well as I think the videos from our other beginner and intermediate classes will be on there.
Yeah, so feel free to ask any, as David said, any general Excel classes or anything specific to this class. We'll wait a few minutes while you think of or catch up. All right, so I have a question about where are the recordings. So I'm going to copy a link into the chat. If you just give me a second, I will do that. Sorry, just a minute. Okay, let me go into the chat for you. Okay, so you should see a link in the chat. That's our live guide for all of our classes. And we don't have recordings for every class, but the ones that we have will be embedded there. And you'll also see the course materials there as well. And David, we gotta thank you.
No problem. And we'll be back for next week, right? For the next one.
Well, next week, the 11th is a county holiday, so it'll be the 18th.
Okay.
So in 2 weeks. So feel free to type in questions so we can wait just a bit. Otherwise, we appreciate you attending class. And if you think of something later or have questions later, just shoot me an email, okay?
Sarah, I just want to say thank you for making this all possible, and David for the great lesson tonight. Really appreciate it.
Sure, of course. Okay, you got another thank you. Since we're just waiting to see if there's any other questions. Oh, okay, we have a question, David. Okay, so one of our participants does treasure work for a church, and each month there are a few hundred donations made. When a month's donations arrive, there are always some new donors. What function would compare two spreadsheets, highlighting the new names on the second list?
So I think there's always kind of a few options for something like this. I think I would imagine you're also keeping kind of a running total of donations and their names. And in that case, I would think an easy option would be I can kind of show if I had kind of name donation. And say like, right, if this was full first and last name and the random total of donations, if I had kind of this new sheet, I'll just act like, and I paste in kind of this new sheet where it's like Rob's donation. One option could be to kind of look at your column. If you highlight it and go to data, there's actually an option. Which one? Oh, yeah. Oh, I do the conditional formatting. Will probably be another easy one. Highlight cell rows, and you can just click highlight duplicate values with a red text. That's option that, you know, just the whole name column, highlight duplicate text, and that'd be assuming that you're kind of keeping a running log, and each month you get new donations, you kind of copy and paste it into your same ongoing list, and that's one way you could look at doing it. very quickly.
So if that doesn't answer your question, feel free to clarify if there's something else we can cover or if you have any additional questions. I'm going to post another link in the chat. We do have one-on-one tech help. So if you ever are working in Excel or anything else and you run into a specific issue that you need help with, you can make an appointment. It's virtual, of course, right now. But here we go. So if that's everything, if everyone got their questions answered. Oh, nope. Oh, it looks like you did answer the questions, so that's good. And they're going to go back over it and get familiar with the 2 new functions. So thank you, David. And if there's no more new questions, we're going to end the class. But again, don't hesitate to reach out if you end up getting stuck later. Okay. And thank you, David and Rachel. And thank you for everyone for attending the class. Take care and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.